Is the federal government spending too much or too little on military? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Catherine's TED Talk, where we talk about controversial topics that are still up for debate to this day. In this episode, it is a Christmas special, so sit back and enjoy and leave your debates and opinions in the comments. Okay, so to kind of provide some background information, I wanted to touch upon the federal budget process and the steps within the federal budget process. So I posted a slide, so you can either read off there or just listen, but I will be going through the steps. So the first step is budgets being written and submitted to the president. From there, the president will write his own budget request, which he will then submit to Congress. Then the House and Senate review the budget and make resolutions, which then goes to what's called a conference committee, and they make their own budget resolutions as well. From there, the House and Senate vote and make markups on the budget request. And then finally, after a final conference committee, the president can either choose to veto it or sign it into law. So two terms that you probably heard of, maybe you don't even know the meaning to, is revenues and outlays. So revenues is basically the amount of income, and in this case, I'm talking about the federal government, the amount of income the federal government has, and the amount of money it has to spend. So, as you can see in this little pie chart, they have $3.4 trillion in revenues or income, and outlays are basically the amount of money spent. So, the amount of money that the government has spent is about $6.6 trillion. So, as you can probably tell, the outlays are more than the revenues, which is probably something to keep mind of. And you can take a look at these pie charts to kind of see where your money is probably going. So, to kind of get started on the military and defense portion of this video, I wanted to take a look at a pie chart that I found that is based on 2020 and on the Department of Defense and how much they spent on military activities and what percentages go where. So the percentages are as follows. Operation and maintenance is 41%, military personnel is 23%, procurement is 20%, research, development, test, and evaluation is 14%, and military construction and family housing is 1%. So the Department of Defense spent $690 billion on military activities. And I also want to mention that these percentages can always change, and they probably have changed over time. And that is because one year you might need one thing more, such as military personnel. So let's say we were in a war, for example. We might need more military personnel, which would raise the percentage and the cost for military personnel alone. So the House of Appropriations Committee kind of oversees the funding for the military and defenses, and they're kind of in charge of it. But there are also subdivisions within this committee, which include the Department of Defense, which I mentioned before, and the intelligence community, which includes several different things such as services, central intelligence, and national security agency. So those are kind of the Appropriation Committee and subdivisions within the Appropriation Committee that oversee funding for the military. Compared to other nations and other countries, the U.S. stays ranked number one for the most spent on military and defense. So as you can see in this pie chart, the U.S. spent $778 billion on military and defense alone, while the second highest ranked for military spending is China, and they spent $252 billion. As you can see, there is a significant difference between the two. There's an ongoing debate whether the U.S. spends way too much on military or if they spend just the right amount. In my opinion, I think they spend way too much. They should be able to cut back on it slightly and still have enough money to fund the military. In the previous picture that I showed, you can tell that the U.S. spends far more than any other nation. There's about a $4 billion difference between the U.S. and China, which was ranked the second highest in spending. I would improve this budget by cutting it back to at least $350 billion. I think that's a good amount to stay ranked number one highest in spending, but still having enough money to fund other areas in the government as well. If I was to reduce spending in the military department, I would use the extra money to kind of focus on education and trying to get free education for all. In the long run, I think this will help boost our economy. If I offer free education and better education, more people will be getting education and more people will be able to get jobs. In the long run, this will provide more money going back into our economy, which we can even use in the military department as well. If I was to increase spending, I would get the money from taxes, and I think this is the most reasonable option because most of the older citizens, I believe, probably agree with the amount we're spending on right now and wouldn't mind spending a little bit more. I also think government officials would lean towards the older generation because they are more reliable. So to keep them happy, the government officials would kind of lean towards the older generation as well. So if I was to increase spending, I would get it from the taxes. To kind of continue what I was saying before, a large chunk of taxpayer money already goes towards defense spending. So by hiring the taxes to increase the budget, I think that will not cause a big problem as one may think it would. To kind of create some solutions and ideas for how we could cut back on budgeting and how we should correctly budget, I would create campaigns where I would go and talk about why I think we should cut back on spending, where that extra money would go, and kind of listening to different opinions. And in that case, we would kind of create a bigger group of people who believe that we should decrease spending, and that will kind of give us some recognition. To kind of appropriate tax dollars more effectively, again, we could cut back on it to kind of lower the cost of defense spending as well as lowering the cost of taxes. So if I was to use money for the education that I was saying before, I would lower the cost to a reasonable amount so I would have enough money to spend on this education as well as have enough money to fund the military. So thank you for listening to my first TED Talk about the military spending and the budget for military spending. If you have a different opinion or another argument, please put it in the comments. I would like to hear more from different sides and different point of views. Again, I hope you enjoyed it, and please tune in for another one.